Verse 6. And Jonathan said to the young men that bare his armor, Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. Well, that's the second time you said that. Come, let us go. That's his mantra. Come, let us go. We know that that is his spirit. That is the spirit of Jonathan. Come, let us go. And now he tells him where we're going to go. We're going to go over to the Philistines' camp. So this whole feat, we know, is a work of faith. But specifically now, he's demonstrating faith in God's ability. We have to give credit to Jonathan for not being a stupid man. He had to know that in the natural, two going out against the encampment don't have a very good chance. He knew his ability. He was a great, mighty man of valor, but that doesn't make you Samson necessarily. He didn't say, let us do this for God, or let us do this for God, or in his name, etc. He said, no, the Lord will say it. It's not something we're going to do for God. God's going to have to do this deal. It's God's ability that we have surety of, that we are trusting. Because he can save by many or by few. All right. Now the next character quality. Jonathan wasn't just expressing faith that God could. The greatest statement of Jonathan's faith came just before that in that verse. And it's rarely ever quoted. Most Christians struggle with faith. Their main struggle in their walk with the Lord in faith is not that God can. Is that God will for them. Let's look at verse 6. It may be that the Lord will work. Who? For us. For us. We must hold on to that. Because our lives really do depend on it. It means it's really of no value to us if there's some, great power out there if it's not made available to us. So he is demonstrating not just faith in God's ability, but number 5, faith in God's personal attention. He is a very present help in time of trouble, as you know. All right, verse 7. And his armor bearer said unto him, Do all that is in thine heart. Turn thee, behold, I am with thee according to thy heart. Wow! What an armor bearer. I'm just plugging this in here. This isn't a character quality, but it is something very important. The people that he chose to be his companions were like-minded people of faith. We know, verses like evil communications, corrupted manners, the sayings like, if you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. That's the principle here. The first time Jonathan told this armor bearer, come, let us go, he could have thought, well, maybe we're going to scout or do something. I don't know, it could have been any number of reasons why. But the second time Jonathan says go, he reveals his intentions. He says, hey, how about you and me? We go over there and we take on all these guys. Don't worry, it'll be great. We're going to do it. If you were to imagine that scenario, the guy would have responded like, what? Are you crazy? No, this guy says, go for it. I'm with you. This is significant because we know all the rest of the people are hiding in holes or bogs or trembling in the camp following a king who's sitting under some tree. Okay, so we know that Jonathan has proven that he specifically chooses the people he's able to choose to be in his life. He surrounds himself with people of like-minded faith that people can build you up or tear you down, and he's picking people to be around him that build him up. Okay, so we know that Jonathan had a plan. His plan was both a fleece to the Lord and also a test of the enemy's courage. Okay, verses 11 and 12. So down to 11 and 12. And both of them discovered themselves unto the garrison of the Philistines, and the Philistines said, Behold, the heroes have come forth out of the holes in which they hid themselves. Ha, ha, ha. You can just imagine the attitude with which they said that. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, Come up to us, we'll show you something. And you can just imagine the eyes rolling. Sure, you're going to show me something. Well, according to the fleece and the test here, they responded in the cowardly fashion. They were not expecting someone to not take that easy pass that they were guarding. He came on in some other way. That the devil doesn't expect you not to fall into his traps. He doesn't expect you to not respond with hate, envy, jealousy. These Philistines, they didn't want to go into these places where their superior numbers wouldn't be as valuable to them. They didn't want to go down to where Jonathan and his armor bearer were. The devil, he's really is a wimp when it actually comes to the test. They couldn't dream that there was literally just 2 soldiers coming out against them because, who has the faith in their Lord God to come out against us? There had to be some other people down there in those cliffs waiting for them. No, you come down to us, we'll show you something. Sure. Well, and Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has delivered them into the hand of Israel." That was the end of that verse. Did he not even hear what they said? So it sounds like, it didn't sound like he didn't hear one syllable of what the enemy said. All he was hearing was what God was saying through that. And that's exactly what we have to do. The enemy says one thing, but the Lord says another. The Lord was saying to Jonathan and his armor bearer, "The victory's yours. Go get them, at 'em, boys. Get them." They may be taunting you, but that wasn't what the Lord was saying. The Lord was saying, go get them. Go whoop them. That makes you have the next character quality of boldness. The righteous are bold as a lion. How does that happen? When the devil throws his taunts and his lies, you don't even hear it. All you hear, when the devil's saying you're sick, you're defeated, you're alone, all you hear is God's promises, by his stripes I'm healed. No, I'm more than a conqueror. He will never leave me nor forsake me. You're mine. That enemy's mine. You're fixing to be defeated. All right, verse 12. Again, Jonathan, let's look at it a different way. Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me." This is the 3rd time he said, "Come." I want to change this a little bit. Come up after me. Yeah. Not after you, after me. He wasn't showing courtesy. "Okay, we're going to go do this now. You go." No. Follow me. He went out first. He was just one of the many ways Jonathan in his life demonstrated the character quality of leadership. His armor bearer, we know from his own mouth that he obviously trusted God the same way Jonathan did, but he also had to have faith and trust in Jonathan, that Jonathan had indeed heard from God. That comes from watching Jonathan's life, his walk with the Lord, and watching the fruit of his life, and knowing that he was indeed a righteous man. That reminds me of a t-shirt. You've probably seen it. I think it's hilarious. It says, "Bomb Squad, if you see me running, follow." Our lives should reflect our faith the same way. Show me thy faith I'll show you my faith by my works. Wherever you see some great man of God or man or woman of God, say, "Okay, I'm following them," because we know we're going to be victorious and the devil's going to get a whooping. All right. Be thou an example. 1 Timothy 4:12. Be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, faith, and purity. If you see me running, go. It's going to be good. The Lord's with us. All right. Verse 12. Again. We know, for the Lord hath, then Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord hath delivered them into the hand of Israel." Okay, there are several people here in this story that talk about defeating, in these chapters, talk about defeating the Philistines. Jonathan and Saul both talk about it. Jonathan didn't say, "delivered into my hand." He said, "delivered into the what? The hand of Israel." He was seeing the big picture. He was seeing, having the proper perspective. These are the enemies of Israel, and therefore the enemies of God. He had the declared quality of vision. Vision. Contrast this to Saul's attitude when he made that ridiculously counterproductive oath over the people, no one shall eat or whatever until I be avenged upon whose enemies? My enemies. My enemies. The Philistines were no more his personal enemies. They were just the traditional enemies against the whole nation of Israel for hundreds of years. He was getting caught up in it personally. That's short-sighted. He couldn't see past the pettiness of his own personal politics there. That lack of vision that he had led to the distress and faintness of the people. Where there's no vision, the people perish. We cannot regard the attacks on us personally. It will only lead to ruin. We have to remember the servant is not greater than the master. They hated Jesus, they're going to hate us too. We have to, like Jonathan, keep that proper perspective and have the vision of what all this really means in the big picture. Okay, verse 13. And Jonathan climbed up upon his hands and upon his feet, and his armor bearer after him. Okay, climbed up on his hands and his feet. Hands, why didn't it just say he climbed up? On his hands. We know hands are representative of what you do. Your feet are representative of where you go. Together, they represent your entirety, your focus, demonstrating the character quality of focus. The same symbolism is used, for example, in the death of Jezebel. Jezebel's focus was bent on destruction, slaying the prophets of God. Well, Jonathan's focus was the same thing. It was bent on destruction, but on the enemies of God. Some cliffs, it requires your entirety to get over. The Lord himself said some of these come out not but by prayer and fasting. Sometimes it takes the entirety of all your focus. Okay, 14 and 15. And that was the first slaughter, first slaughter, that's interesting. And the first slaughter which Jonathan, his armor bearer, made was about 20 men, within, as it were, a half acre of land, which a yoke of oxen might plow. And there was a trembling in the host, in the field, and among all the people, the garrison and the soldiers, in other words, everything. They also trembled, and the earth quaked, and it was a very great trembling. The Lord sent an earthquake. Why? He was honoring Jonathan's faith. Jonathan's character quality of unusual faith. Let's look at that. Faith that the Lord honors. There's a quote from Chariots of Fire. He who honors God, God will honor. Yeah. All this confidence and faith that Jonathan has demonstrated in the Lord's leading and ability, and all of that, the Lord had respect for it. We know that faith does what? It moves mountains. Just enough faith as a mustard seed will cast mountains into the sea. This is a fulfillment of that. Earthquakes in the Bible are always signal a release of God's power. Somehow it boils down to a release of God's power. At Sinai, at the crucifixion, at the resurrection, the release of Paul and Silas, etc. Steps of faith always release God's power in our lives. And that's truly something to aspire to. Same, because there's always a higher level. We will never have attained greatness in that. There's always going to be a deeper walk, a higher walk in faith. Always. Remember the centurion. He had this same unusual faith. He said, you don't even have to come. And the Lord looked around and was like, I've not found so great a faith. No, not in Israel. It was unusual faith that didn't just get the job done, but got the Lord's attention. Unusual faith that the Lord honored. Okay, verse 16. And the watchman of Saul in Gibeah, okay, now we find out what he's doing, looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went on beating down on one another Okay, remember, you can see Michmash from Gibeah. It's just the other side of the gorge. If Jonathan had failed, if he'd gone out in his own strength and failed, it would have been quite a spectacular failure in the sight of God and everybody in the whole host of Israel. 2 Corinthians 3:2 says we are to live our lives as an open epistle, known and read of all men. He was demonstrating that quality of being an open epistle. Number 11, being an open epistle. So when you do things before all men, that has a result. What is the result? It divides your spectators into two groups of people. People who build up and people who tear down. Well, what does Saul do when he sees? What category does he fit in? Verse 17. And then Saul said unto the people that were with him, Number down and see who has gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. And Saul said unto Micaiah, Bring hither the ark of God, for the ark of God was at that time with the children of Israel. And it came to pass while Saul talked unto the priest, that the noise that was in the host of the Philistines went on and increased. And Saul said unto the priest, Withdraw thy hand. Now, why would it interest Saul who exactly it was that was gone? He already had showing his presumption that it was one of his men, one of the Israelites. He was numbering his troops not for battle, but to see who it was that was gone. He figured it was one of his own men. But I think his guess was a lot more refined than that. Let's look at verse 17. Again, the word behold is the Hebrew word hineh, H-I-N-N-E-H. And in this particular context, the more accurate rendering of that word would be more along the lines of after all, or the best modern expression, sure enough. So you read that, and when they had numbered, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there after all. Or, and when they numbered, sure enough, Jonathan and his armor bearer were gone. That kind of changes his attitude just a little bit. Sure enough, that dratted son of mine has gone out and messed up my brilliant plan of appeasement. Remember, that's his attitude. It's Jonathan that stirred up that hornet nest at Gibeah in the first place. Sure enough, that dratted son of mine. His first thought wasn't about whether God was giving him the victory or not. His first thought was about that wayward son of his messing everything up. And then he tarried all the more. He had to test and see if that really was God. God is out there sending earthquakes. God is plainly moving. The Spirit of God is plainly moving. And he had the attitude, would God really work that way through Jonathan? Some people are like that about us. God really worked with fellow Christians. Will God really work that way through you?
Oh yeah, preach it. Amen.
Through you? You know, they were like that to the Lord himself. This is Joseph's son. When he did some great and mighty works, they all know he must be casting out devils from the prince of devils. He's messing everything up. He's messing our order up with the Romans. He's messing our order up here with our little synagogue order that we have. No. When the actions of person A reveal a lack or deficiency in person B, person B category can have two reactions. They can be provoked to envy and hatred, like Saul had. Or some persons in that B category can be provoked to rise to the challenge. Well, let's see if somebody did. Verse 21 and 22. Moreover, the Hebrews that were with the Philistines before that time, which went up with them in the camp from the country round about, the ones who had went up with the first, and then defected, left, hid, even they also turned about to be with the Israelites that were with Saul and Jonathan. Likewise, the ones that were hiding, the ones which had hid themselves in Mount Ephraim when they heard that the Philistines fled, then they also followed hard after them in the battle. Those had backslid and defected. Those had become fearful and went to hide. They were challenged. And they rose to the challenge, said, we're going to start fighting them too. Yes, we may be 6, but we're going to start fighting this enemy as well. And that is the purpose of being an open epistle. That is the purpose, to be known and read of all men. It's to bring others to the Lord's side and give us victory. So, verse 23. Verse 23. And the Lord saved Israel that day. That's the same language, echoing back to verse 6. For the Lord can save. For the Lord did save. And it's just a confirmation of his words, a confirmation of what was in his spirit, that he was speaking through the unction of the Spirit. The Lord can save. Well, hallelujah. They had a great day of victory. All right. So that was the 5th glimpse that we have of Jonathan. Now let's separate that and move on to our 6th glimpse of Jonathan. We know in this glimpse, we will find out what a patriot he is.